I'm Tricia Logan. I'm an assistant professor in the Institute for Critical Indigenous Studies and cross-appointed with the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. I'm an assistant professor in First Nations and Indigenous Studies. I'm a Métis scholar originally from Kakabeka Falls, Ontario, and I'm working on a project called Facing Colonial Complicity that looks at reconciliation to reparations, in particular roles that UBC and the University of Victoria had, and really looking at two big questions, some archival research and some historical research into the roles that these post-secondary institutions had in operating residential schools, Indian hospitals, day schools, what the curriculum was like, what kind of training was at the schools, and really looking at what it means to move that conversation from reconciliation to reparations. It's an important distinction between reparations and reconciliation, and it's not to diminish the work of reconciliation, because for decades, for years, a lot of the narrative and a lot of the drive for reconciliation came directly from survivors asking to have their stories heard, to approach a new relationship with the rest of Canada and to take action and to see real transformative change. And it's, as you can imagine, it's a frustrating position to be in, and for calls for justice and calls for accountability and calls to action, some having been met and some change visible, but still some falling behind. And so shifting that conversation to reparations, especially for, as an example, post-secondary institutions, as an example, but also of what are constructive ways to start to give back. And it's not necessarily monetary compensation, but it's looking at language and culture and the role that a partnership with Indigenous communities to learn what is the best route and how they define reparations and what they feel reparations would be best served. I think there's some hope in institutional transformation to see real transformative change. I think using as an example the Musqueam Nation and all of the teachings and all of the generous care they've taken to work with us here at UBC, I think there's so much hope in all of the resistance and resurgence and thought they've put into their work directly with UBC. There's so many teachings that I know they've shared over decades, over several decades, but moving forward and bridging that with a real kind of motivation and a real will on the university side to make some of those changes. A lot of the Indigenous students I have the pleasure of working with at UBC have amazing visions for Indigenous futures, a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation, and I think there's a lot of hope in that, especially where there's balancing frustration and balancing histories of trauma and contemporary impact. I think balancing that, finding space for hope and voices. I've learned a lot, especially from students from all over Canada and from everywhere who've really added to that dialogue on what reparations could mean.